In the years that we've been doing the damage report, we've covered a lot of state level legislation, and a lot of it's weird at the state level. But I think this just might be the strangest bill that we've ever discussed. It involves a plan in Missouri that Republican lawmakers are advancing to make it so that you don't have to pay your income taxes if instead you just donate the same amount of money to pregnancy resource centers. Pregnancy resource centers, they're anti-abortion clinics. That's basically what it is. It's places that are trying to convince you to not exercise your rights or whatever. And that's a strange thing to set up because generally lawmakers want the government in their state to have funds. They have big fights about that. In this case, they're willing to forego the revenue if instead you just give it to Christians masquerading as an organization that cares about women. So this proposal would establish a 100% tax credit, up from the 70% that's already there. So they already have a bunch of this, by the way, and a $50,000 annual cap per taxpayer. The result, nearly all Missouri households, except those with the highest incomes, could fully satisfy their state tax bill by redirecting their payment to pregnancy centers. Warwick's bill, this is the state legislature, would also increase the tax credit for donations to maternity homes from 70 to 100%, and for diaper banks from 50 to 100%. And so you're probably familiar with these crisis pregnancy centers. They're supposed to be there so that if you go looking for a place to inform you of your rights or get healthcare, you instead end up at one of these places and you get a bunch of like Christian fascist dogma or whatever. And so seems sort of strange. And along the way, not only do they want the funding to go there, but they're not gonna get it. And so, look, again, like you could theoretically do this, I guess, in a blue state to, I don't know, a place that helps migrants or a place that fights climate change or whatever. We would never think to do that. That is the strange experimentation that's happening at the state level by Republican lawmakers these days. Francesca, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think it's strange or creative or unique. I think it's so sick. I mean,
it's definitely sick.
Speaking of like legislation and ideas and policies that are microcosms of a broader way that the right thinks about women's bodies and the government in general. It's this, we're gonna take your tax dollars that go to things like funding public education, that fund things like healthcare, that fund things like job training, that fund things like infrastructure, that support our local economy, and we're gonna put them into the very thing that will pour more people into poverty, that would bring more people into a life of misery that we have now defunded because we funded a psychotic extremist position of not allowing abortions. And again, 60% of people who want abortions are, say it with me, already parents. We know this, okay? Yeah. And so I just couldn't imagine a more cruel piece of legislation deliberately pitting women's bodies, families against funding. I mean, it's the very thing that could actually, if you did want to be anti-choice and yet you did want to support families, you'd want to put taxes into things like education and healthcare. Instead, we're gonna put it into just making sure the babies are born. But again, for what? So we can grind them up for the whatever, for Elon's rockets.
Or to invade Greenland, or
exactly.
When they hit 14, they can be forced into marriages with incels or whatever. Like, yeah,
someone's gonna have to work the meat processing plants where we grind up the other babies.
100%, yeah. By the way, like imagine if Biden was like, you know what, Planned Parenthood, you donate to Planned Parenthood, that's your federal tax debt owed or whatever. Like, can you imagine how the
uproar?
That would have been a thing he could have done to show support in the wake of the killing of Roe v. Wade. But again, I wouldn't have even thought of it at that point. But hey, look, we're all learning lots of lessons these days. Isn't it an exciting time to be alive? Anyway, so I do want to just briefly mention before we close things out, it was just in this last election in November that Missouri Amendment 3, the right to abortion, got nearly 52% of the vote. And so it seems, again, as with so many states, that, hey, Missouri actually is on the right side of this issue. And so, yeah, like, again, they already had big tax credits. And someone in the chat was like, how are you gonna fund the government if everybody does this? Nobody, exactly, but they don't care. They don't want the government to do much at all because those who are already doing well don't need its services. They need stability or whatever, but they don't need aid or whatever. They don't need regulation. They don't need a government that can do its job. We always, again, it's the fundamental many asymmetries in our government. We don't all have different things we want the government to do, okay? Because not everybody's struggling in the same way. Those who are struggling the most need the government to help them. Those who are already winning need the government to keep off of their backs. And this is a great example of that at the state level.